On this week in sales, we're going to be taking a look at video messaging, digital sales rooms, missing targets, and a lot more. My name is Will Barron. I'm the founder over at salesman.org. And joining me, co-host of this show, Victor, Sales Royalty. Antonio, how's it going, mate?
Well, you had me laughing because, we do our pre-call conversations. That you are just hilarious when you're not like formally on the microphone. I want people to know that sometimes it's harder for me to get on this thing with a straight face. And the last thing you told me was just hilarious. You're so blunt.
I think that's one of my...
Yes, I'm doing well, Will. I'm doing well, man.
I think that's one of my superpowers, Victor, to be able to be blunt. And maybe there's like an emotional issue in my brain, but I just find it so much easier when people are straight. And I'm dealing with an estate agent at the moment. We won't talk about it on the show. And people are just, it's frustrating. Absolutely frustrating. So yeah, I try and be as blunt. And with someone like yourself who can take it and have an intelligent adult conversation over it, hopefully you appreciate that as well.
I do. I just want to. I'll give the audience this much. I've been thinking about this idea for about a good week now, and then Will shoots it down with it. Would it take about 5-10 seconds for you to shoot that idea down?
Yeah, something like that.
It was great.
Okay, well, with that, Victor, let's jump straight in because we'll just say to the audience, right? We're going to try and condense this a little bit and then get to the good stuff. We think that the value, the entertainment is probably in audience questions and a bit of banter between the two of us. So let's jump straight into some sales news.
All right, let me kick it out with Vidyard. I think Vidyard's customer base surpasses 250,000 companies as business adoption of video messaging accelerates. Will, let me just stop there. What do you think of that headline right there?
Is that paying customers or is that people using the free version of things?
I don't think they highlight that. They talk about, for example, the leading video platform for business. Everybody's always leading, right? It's amazing how everybody's leading. Today announced that more than 12.5 million people across the 250,000 companies are now using it. That's as far as they went. It's video messaging and video hosting tools. As Vidyard continues to accelerate running out of the pandemic and the global reopening of the economy, the company saw its customer base expand by more than 300% annually, Will. Come on, show them some love, Will.
I like Vidyard. I like it as a product. But if that's people using 3 products, then we've got an email list of like 100,000 people who, is it a free product, our newsletter, the content that we send out? Maybe. Do I turn around and say I've got 100,000 customers? Definitely not, because I definitely could never even handle that. Never mind kind of dream it to be into existence, Victor. But 300 growth 300% annually, that's got to be expected, right? It's got to be at least expected in the fact that we're now all working from home and video messaging and communicating on video like we're doing right now is just so valuable, important, and accessible. It wasn't accessible 5 years ago. And I think companies like Vidyard are killing the game because they've got the right product at the right time at the right moment.
Isn't it fascinating, Will, that one could say that the pandemic was that black swan moment that worked in their favor?
Yep.
Totally. Anyway, McKinsey had a little study here that I just added. That was part of the article. It says 83%, 83. So we're talking a big piece here. B2B decision makers feel the new selling models are as effective as, Will, or more effective than pre-COVID models. In fact, these B2B decision makers overwhelmingly believe these shifts will persist even when the pandemic is over. Will, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, of course it's true. If you're a B2B buyer right now, you go on, you identify your own problem. You're probably not speaking to a salesperson at that point. You go on YouTube, you watch a few videos. We're going to talk about digital sales rooms in a minute. And I've just helped close on behalf of another company a digital sales room deal on the back of some conversations I've had this week and some content I've created on that subject, right? So you go on, you probably catch one of our podcasts, one of your podcasts, a product video. And at that point, you've probably narrowed down the companies that you like because of the content and the training that they're offering on the product pre-sale. So you've done all the job yourself. You know how to speak to anyone. You've done it on your own schedule. And then hopefully you speak to a B2B salesperson that can add that sprinkle of insights and magic on top and facilitate the deal, make it happen, make everything go smooth, fit it into budgets, negotiate on behalf of the organization, make things happen. So they should appreciate it and they should prefer it because who wouldn't? the B2B salespeople of the past. And this is kind of, maybe back in your day and then towards the end of, I think I was at the end of it when I first started in sales, where you could get away with a lot of maybe, not a lot of, maybe a little bit of sleight of hand. And there was like 27 closing statements and different ways to like push people into getting deals done or booking calls and that kind of thing. That was all dying off as I was getting into sales. It's clearly dead now. And the modern B2B buying environment, with all the content and digital sales rooms and the facilitation of Zoom calls and all this kind of stuff, buyers can buy from the desk. They don't have to be flying around the world or having people flown in to deal with them. It's got to be a better buying experience, for 99% of them.
Yeah, I find this interesting because I'm working with a large technology company right now, and I was talking to their VP, and some of his salespeople, he didn't give me the percentage, but some of his salespeople are still stuck in the past, thinking again, we're going to go back to normal. But I think this has become part of the new normal, as we've talked about ad nauseum on this podcast.
And it should be. It's a better buying experience. It's going to kill off and call a load of just really shitty salespeople that shouldn't be in the marketplace anyway. And it's going to turn salespeople who are killers, people who can really add value, who have the network, who have the insights, who have the experience and the product and the space. They're going to be exponentially rewarded on the back of this, because the business is still, if the business is doing 100 million in turnover, and sales is a massive part of that, there's going to be fewer salespeople. So those salespeople that survive are going to be doing a higher percentage of the turnover and the revenue, especially on subscription models, what a lot of companies are moving towards. They're going to become even more valuable, because I know when I was in medical devices, if I went from, and I did this, from the biggest competitor to the other biggest competitor, I brought a load of customers over with me. And that back then was a capital purchase. Now, if it was 30 million quid a year's worth of subscription or service contracts that I'd take from one side to the other, that makes me as an individual worth 20, 30 million a year to that company. So salespeople are going to get paid more and more on the back of this, and buyers are going to get a better buyer's journey because they're somewhat more in control of it, depending on, with the exception that the salespeople, marketers, sales engineers have got to build a pathway to enable them to do it themselves, right? It's got to be, they can't do the buying journey themselves if there isn't the content and training and access to resources online for them to do it themselves. But if that's all in place, everyone's happy. everyone should be absolutely loving it until AI comes out and just smashes everyone and wipes everyone off the face of the planet. Sales is a really good place to be.
With total optimism, total pessimism. I love the range. But with this data point, it validates again what we've been saying, and everybody else has been saying who's really thinking about this, is that remote sales is here to stay.
Was remote sales not already here?
It was. I mean, you get on the phone, that's remote sales to some extent, right? I mean, that's remote sales. I think let me be very clear, because that's a very good delineation you're making. Remote sales has always been here since we started phone calling, right? The video version of remote selling is what I think they're really alluding to here. That part is really becoming part of the process. And again, this kind of puts for me, it sticks a fork in this whole debate about whether we're going back to normal and whether remote sales will still be useful. I'm like, let's get past that. It is. It's going to be part of our natural sales process.
I think this is counterintuitive. I think we look at this selfishly from the sales side of things and go, oh, we can't travel anymore, or we can't do this, we can't do that. I don't think that's the issue. I think what's changed is buyers are happy to get on a Zoom call. Buyers are happy to do a 200 grand deal without shaking hands with a salesperson and seeing a CFO at the organization in person. I think it's not sales that's changed. Well, sales has changed, but I think it's on the back of buyers lowering the gates to access and being more comfortable with video.
Agree with you 100%. And I think that's the small shift. So that's a great point to highlight.
I appreciate it. Okay, let's move on to, I think, who is this by? This is Aligo. We're going to talk about Aligo in a second as well. And
is that how you say it, Aligo?
Aligo.
I thought it was Aliego,
so.
Like, the double L means Y, so it's Aligo.
Oh, you might be right. Well, this is from the martechcube.com. You can find everything that we talk about in this episode of the show in the show notes over at This Week in Sales. All the links. This is 76% of companies miss targets due to poor adoption of tools. This is like a sponsored post by Aligo. We're going to go through some of these numbers right now. And some of these numbers I thought were really interesting. And credit to Allego. I'm going to say it like that now. I'm going to take your word for it, Victor. Their study was 330 B2B sales leaders, so a decent amount. They also quote in the study the margin of error and then the confidence level, which they quote is 95%. So I've got slightly more confidence than usual that this is a half decent study rather than the usual crap that gets thrown out in the kind of sales content marketplace, I guess. So we'll go through some of these numbers. Some of these were not necessarily surprised, but I think it was interesting to have the data on. So I'm quoting from the article here. On average, companies say that they've wasted $313,000 on sales tools that weren't fully adopted by reps over the past 2 years. Does that surprise you, Victor?
The number actually seems, the more I think about it, it seems rational. I wonder if they actually did a counter balance to that, say, how the tools actually helped them improve their sales would be interesting also. But that's a good data point.
Yep. Well, and obviously this is averaged over different size organizations and that. Because if I wasted $313,000 of salesman.org's money revenue on sales tools, we'd be knackered. So I assume there's some big companies involved in this as well, right? Where that number might not be as alarming as what it seems on the surface. Next fact or data point, 76% of companies say poor adoption of sales tools is the top reason or is a top reason teams miss their sales quotas. Is that surprising, Victor? We're blaming the lack of quota hitting via sales tools.
Yeah, there's two things in there. One is the poor adoption, which brings up the question, why? And usually I really believe, Will, I'd love to get your take on this, Will, and anybody who's watching this, give me your take on this. That poor adoption is a result of poor explanation by leadership as to why we should use the tool. In other words, management or leaders should sell their people on why the tool is necessary, and I think they're doing a poor sales job. What do you think of that thought?
I think, Victor, that is absolute nonsense.
Okay.
I think
go on.
If you create a product or a tool and you're selling it into the marketplace and you manage to get it in the hands of a potential of a customer, paying customer, and it's not being adopted, this is not down to sales leadership. It's a crappy product and a crappy onboarding process. If and people, I can see this in my training, my pleb tiny little training platform over at salesman.org, right? I can see how often people log in. I can see in a dashboard that we've built whether people log in more than like 3 times, 5 times. I can see when someone logged in, did a load of work, and then didn't log in for 6 months. Because what we do then is email them and chase them up and get on people's backs. And the people are always appreciative of, kind of got excited, got started, and then kind of lost track of where we were training. So we keep on top of our customers, right? So we're not happy just to take. Go on.
Well, I wanted a counterpoint with like, for example, CRMs, right? CRMs typically have, people buy them, but they have a low adoption rate by salespeople. And I often think it's that, and this is the point I'm trying to make, is that I often think it's that management doesn't explain as to the reason why we need the actual tool, and what's the benefit to the person actually using it. So in other words, if you just tell me, hey, start putting data into the CRM, right? Start putting data into CRM. I'm going, okay, why? Because if the first thing that comes to a salesperson's mind is that's kind of KGB style, right? You're just going to monitor what I do, right? So let's just say that that's one frame of mind, right? That's one mindset people have. It is sales leadership's responsibility. Said, look, it's not really about monitoring you. Here's what we're trying to get at. We're trying to collect data. We're trying to get this. We're trying to make down the road, build a recommendation engine to help you upsell, cross-sell more effectively, or target markets or companies more effectively. The more data we put in, blah, 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 this is how it benefits you. And it's not a monitoring tool. I think that's what I mean about we need to sell people on why they need to use it.
No, I strongly disagree, Victor. CRM is a great example.
Okay, well, let's pause here. All right, so if you're watching this live, give us your argument. Victor or Will, who do you agree with? He says it's not leadership's responsibility. You're probably saying it's the salesperson's responsibility.
Nope.
Which is something. Oh, you're not even saying that. Okay, well, go ahead.
So CRM is a great example, right? Why do companies implement CRMs? It's to help salespeople. No, it's not. It's to do forecasting. It's to do accounting.
Sure.
At the top, because a salesperson isn't getting a choice of whether it's HubSpot, Salesforce, Pipedrive, whoever it is. Salespeople don't get any choice in what user interface that they're going to interact with, what brand.
Okay, so pause right there. Up to this point, we are in full agreement.
Yep.
Keep going.
Oh, we'll be in full agreement the whole way,
Absolutely.
Victor. You'll understand the point I'm making in a second, right?
Okay.
And then you'll be totally on board, and you'll be flying the will flag, right?
All right.
Yeah. So
Go ahead.
So
Go ahead.
CRM's not implemented for salespeople. So sales leadership are just lying to salespeople's faces if they say, well, we're going to collect data and it's going to help you sell, it's going to do this. Some of that is, there's a slight trickle down effect of some of this, but it's not for salespeople, it's for leadership. Now, on top of all of this,
I would agree with that.
A CRM
I would agree
company,
that you see that. By the way, I would agree that you do see that.
Yeah.
That they implement it for selfish reasons, not for the benefit of the salesperson.
Yep. And forecasting is important for the organization. It can't invest. It can't invest in its team. They can't speak adequately as a public company to shareholders and stuff like that if they don't have that technology in place. So if you want your company to exist, CRM is part of that, right? But I think there's a lot of CRMs. There's very little benefits to the end user, which is the salesperson, until somehow the content, the data's all been input in there. But it's not the salesperson's fault. It's not the sales leadership's fault. It's the product manager and product development team's fault. They should be developing a product that everyone who uses it gets something out of. If I know that I'm going to import this data, it's going to take me a little bit of time.
We're saying the same thing, Will. We're saying the same thing. You really do agree with me. You just hate to admit it. And that is that if the person sees no benefit coming from whatever technology they have to use, they're not going to use it. And so whether you blame product management or your sales leadership for buying a tool that really doesn't benefit the salesperson, then you basically unsold them on actually using the tool.
See, what you did there, it's probably called something in manipulation tactics. You took your argument and then just attached it to mine. What you said was it's down to sales leadership to communicate the value, and it's their fault.
Correct.
No. I'm saying product management of the company who makes the CRM. It's a crappy product if the end users get no value from it, when there's an opportunity for the end user to get a ton of value from it. Salespeople should be excited about not necessarily entering data, but having the data in a system that can spit out trends, buying cycles, anything like that. So if the product doesn't do those things, then the product's not taking...
So the first
hold on,
we didn't get past
you
the
keep
first
talking
gate.
over me, Victor Antonio. Shut up a second. Let me finish this point.
Okay, well, go ahead. Just get to the point quicker, man. I get what you're saying. Just get to the point quicker.
I'm getting to the point because we're debating here, so I've got to give the full argument.
Okay, go ahead.
The company is not taking care of the entirety of the stakeholders that are involved in the product. They're just creating a product that gets in the door and then doesn't get adopted, which goes back to my an analogy or story of what I was saying. CRM companies could easily increase adoption by flagging up people who aren't using the software, who aren't doing this, who aren't doing that. They don't have that implemented because it makes the product look shit. And then the sales managers go, well, we don't need this if no one's using it. And so they're going to cancel the contracts. So rather than building a good product, taking the heat and encouraging people to get on it, they just go, wow, well, you're going to pay us, so we'll just keep going and then we'll try and upsell you in the future.
Okay, so I agree with your argument. If you buy a shitty product, we can agree on this. If you buy a shitty product, it doesn't matter how much you push it, nobody's going to use it. That's the first gate. So let's assume that's the first gate. But now let's assume that we got through that gate and it is a great product. Right?
No, wait. What I'm saying is it's not a good product.
Now I got to finish my argument.
I know. But this will help you tee up your argument.
Go ahead.
I'm saying fundamentally, if we're looking at this, 76% say companies poor adoption of the tools means people don't miss quota. On average, they're wasting $300,000 a year. I'm saying fundamentally, it's not a good product in the age that we live in, and we're talking typically sales tools here, like technology tools. It's fundamentally not a good product if people aren't using it. It's the product's fault. You can't blame it on anyone else. You can't blame it on the market change, this, and this. My argument is the product, even if it's been bought and it was adopted for 6 months and then no one uses it anymore, it's the product's fault and the product sucks. That's the point I'm making.
Okay, so again, I go back to the argument again. If the product sucks, as you point out, there's no adoption. Can we agree on that? The product sucks, there's no adoption. I mean, it's really basic right here. What I am saying is that let's say you do buy a product like Salesforce that uses Einstein and can give you the data you want. There's still companies that have Salesforce, unless you're calling Salesforce a shitty product and its ability to generate any insight shitty. There's companies that use Salesforce that have low adoption by their sales teams. The question to you is, why is that? If it is a verified, bona fide, great product, why is it that salespeople still are reluctant to use it?
In the age that we live in, and I'm not talking about, I'm talking about specifically about software products now. We understand the feedback loop that encourages people to use products and training. And I know you know this. The audience might be somewhat unfamiliar with it. But these feedback loops, these hooks, we understand all this. The product sucks if people aren't using it. Now, I will move a little bit in that some salespeople just suck and they're never going to use the best product ever, right? But at some point they're just going to drop out the marketplace. So we're not including that kind of 5% of salespeople who just suck at the bottom, who they don't want to work in sales, they don't want to use the CRM. So putting those to one side, it's the product's fault. If Salesforce has been sold into an organization and no one's using it, they don't need Salesforce. If the product was that good and that exceptional and that valuable, people will be clamoring to get onto it and use it, right?
But it's almost the fireplace and wood analogy, right? Give me heat, I'll give you wood, right? Give me heat, I'll give you wood. With the CRM, it's no different. Give me data, I'll give you insight. And it's getting people to put the data in is where the bad sales job occurs. That's what I'm saying. I think by the way, I give it to you that there are bad products out there that no matter what you do, how well you sell it or how much benefit, people are going to ask, screw, I'm not going to use it. But I think there is, and I'll even back off a little bit. There is a sliver of lack of adoption that people simply do not explain the benefit of using it, and salespeople don't trust management. In other words, I don't know if that's really going to get. If I don't see, if I give you wood and I don't see any heat after a month or two, I'm not saying I think you're lying to me. I don't think this furnace works. Is what I'm going to say. I see a CRM the same way. Now, to your point, going back to this second bullet point. Would I tie that into missing their sales quota? I don't know. I'm shaky on that one, Will. What are your thoughts on that? Like tying those two together? I don't think so.
If you have just been given 20 different remote selling tools and they're taking up loads of your time, and I think there was a few other points in there along the lines of that of 86% of reps get confused about which tool to use for which task. Nearly 80% of reps waste time keeping track of different login credentials of different tools. 82% of sales leaders say that trying to get sales reps to use the provided tools feels like a second job. When you factor in all that in, maybe people are missing opportunities. Maybe people aren't doing the basics of having a defined cadence. That there's if you're unsure it works, at least there's a feedback loop to test the effectiveness of it. And you every day you go in, you do your prospecting, you have a set discovery process, you do all the basics that you teach and I teach that training tools seemingly forget. They just kind of want to sparkle this like glitter on top of the actual like fundamentals of sales that actually drives revenue. Maybe if you're spending so much time using all of these tools when there's been so much investment in them, maybe people are missing deals on the back of it. But
I agree.
76% of companies say poor adoption is a top reason teams miss their quotas. The way even it's phrased, right, is a top reason. It's not the top reason.
The adoption of the actual tools actually help you miss more sales. I mean, you could. By the way, the last one, you want to read the last bullet point? This was just too funny. Read this one.
82% of sales leaders say that trying to get sales reps to use the provided sales tools feels like a second job. And I will add an extra paragraph to that because most sales tools suck ass and the team don't want to use
managers, you suck at selling the product. You suck at, it is your second job. It's part of your job. It's not a second job. If you chose the wrong tools for your sales team, you suck. And the fact that you're now blaming it as, it's a second job. Why do I have to do it? You suck. How's that? Come on. Do you know what I mean? Just come on.
Well, hold on, Victor. I'm conscious of time here because we want to get to some audience questions.
Managers kill me. I'm just saying, managers kill me when they go, I feel like it's a second job. Shut up. It is a job. It's part of your job.
Well, so you've got sales leadership experience, right?
Yeah.
How much of your time then would have been spent on CRM and tools versus how much time do you think sales leaders are spending now? And if they're spending this much now, what do they have to drop from their diary to be able to talk and communicate and manage all this technology?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, Will, how to gauge that. It's one of those things where depending how big your sales team is, sometimes if it's too big, it's just not reasonable, right? That you can't do that. So I don't know what the right amount of time is. I would always focus my attention on those who were struggling. I think let me be blunt. When I was managing my sales team and I wanted my data, my info, my reports at the end of the week, I was brutal about it. You know, I was very demanding. So when I didn't get it, I mean, you didn't see the nice Victor. You saw the other Victor show up, you know, on your phone or you know, face to face, and people got it really quick. The Chicago side of me came out really quick, and they go, "Oh shit, let me give this guy his data," and then I would nail people. And the people that didn't submit the information, if they didn't hit their quarterly number, oh, it was even worse. I would rain on them in front of everybody. It was a rainfall, and everybody realized after a while, like, the man really wants his data. Do you know what I mean? And he will question your data. So I really didn't have a problem with that, but that was just because of my management style when it came to that.
When was the last time you got really mad at a person to their face and they saw Chicago Victor?
Dude, you want to hear the story? It was about, I think it was last summer. Short story. So we have a big yard, and some guys were going to lay some pine straw, right, just on our yard, right? And I was trying to help these two young men out, right? Well, they weren't young, well, younger than me. They're like 30, 40, something like that. And we agreed on a price, right? And then I took off, right? So in other words, went somewhere with my wife, and then we came back about 45 minutes later. We agreed like on $350, right? And then the guy tells me it's $700. And I said, what? He said, yeah, $700. We did this and that. It's not what we agreed to. He goes, well, that's what you're going to have to pay. As soon as he said, that's what you're going to have to pay, man, that was it. I lost it. The number of F-bombs I dropped on him, and my finger in his face was like, what's funny is that the second guy was coming up the driveway, almost like to defend him, but I think he saw that side of me, and he kind of just stood there, and he didn't come up. And my wife is just watching this, and I'm like, you know, it was not a good day for the guy. I wrote in the 350, says, get out of here. Just get up. Just leave my driveway now. Just leave. And they both just left.
And was he trying to rip you off, or was it?
Oh yeah. Well, we found out about a month or two later that this was like a little scam that was going on. We got this leftover stuff. We just want to give it to you at a discounted price. To which I thought, okay, great deal. Quid pro quo, this for that. And then to come back and find out that the price was, you know, more than double. I was like, that was it. And when he tried to explain it, I got to be honest, man, I handed his ass to him. You know what I mean? And I was like, and he was like a little bigger than me too. Yeah, he was a big dude, you know, and I'm like, you know, we have a philosophy, you know, it's like, you may kick my ass, but I'm gonna get one good shot in. And I'm like, no, I'm not putting up with that. So I shouldn't do that. I should be more mature about it. I realize that, but I have that side that's just sometimes just the genie comes out of the bottom. It's never a good thing. It's never a good thing, which is why I try to be more cool than ever, you know, just like keep it in there. Keep the bottle in there. Don't piss me off. Well, don't piss me off today.
I'll take it back. It is sales leadership's fault. Everything's sales leadership's fault, Victor. You won. I'm sorry, mate.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
But hey, well, let's move on to sales training, because I want to ask you a question.
Sure.
Can we move into this section?
We can. Go for it.
All right. So you were having a chat with, let me see, what's his name? George Donovan from Ayego.
Mm-hmm.
That guy right there. And he was talking about the digital sales room. And I wanted to hear your takeaways, you know, what you thought of the conversation, pluses and minus. By the way, this is just going to be a personal thing. And I know he's going to come after me on this, George. But man, he's got to get more excited about his conversation about the digital sales room. I was like, dude, I don't feel your energy like it. I'm like, I'm not saying I got a weak neck. You know, by a weak neck, I was falling asleep going, geez, get more excited about the digital sales room. But anyway, what were your takeaways? Because apparently you have a higher tolerance for monotony than I do.
Well, I quite
He's
like.
going to hate me for this, man. He's going to hate. I'm like, dude, get excited. If you're telling the digital sales room, sell it, man. Sell it. Don't just go. He was just kind of laying it on the table like, here's what it is. And I'm like, dude, I feel no energy. So what were your takeaways from that conversation?
The first one was I quite enjoyed it. So I'll stick up for my man George here. The idea of a digital sales room is interesting, right? So the idea, and I think you've got to think of it non-selfishly. I think you've got to think of it from the buyer's perspective. These kind of rooms, and if anyone's unfamiliar, if you imagine Dropbox, but just for you and your buyer in that one specific deal. So they ask for a quote, it goes in the Dropbox. They ask for some literature, it goes in the Dropbox. they want something explained, you do a video via whatever kind of video platform, and we cover them all the time on the show, and it goes in that Dropbox, right? And then maybe you can do it from top to bottom. You can do it in order. You can say, well, we talked about this at the top of the sales process. Right now, toward the end, and you can layer it up. So that's what a digital sales room is. If any of the audience is unfamiliar, I like the idea of it, but I think you've got to really focus on them from you've got to think of it from the perspective of the buyer's journey as opposed to what you want to push them through. I think they're going to get abused, Victor, from salespeople are going to go, well, we know via AliGo and other kind of LMS tools and sales enablement tools, we know that that our buyers go through these 4 pieces of content typically before they buy. So we're going to put these 4 pieces of content in a folder, in a digital sales room, throw it over to the buyer, and then start pestering them to see if they've read it or not. That's good. That's going to happen, but I think that's the wrong way to go about it. That's trying to push the buyer down a specific sales process that you know works, which is what we want to do. But we want to nudge people down the process, right? We want to.
Did you buy it? Did you buy that? Because I don't buy it.
Buy what?
Are you buying that works? Loading folders up for people because you want to accelerate their journey.
So let me explain. So I think that's a shit way of doing it. I think a good way of doing it is to do it from the buyer's journey perspective. So for example, with our training product, I've literally done a bunch of calls there. I've got a bunch more calls coming up. I know that people want to see inside the training. So if I was to use a digital sales room, I would do a quick video going, hey Victor, look forward to speaking to you later on today. Here's a quick overview of the training. Here's the 2 things that we'll talk about in the meeting. And here's this, and this. Here's a snapshot of the community. You can see some of the high-performing sales reps in there, whatever it is. And I'd put that in there. And then before the meeting, I'd say, and then I'd put perhaps the agenda for the meeting in the digital sales room as well. And then I'd go, hey, I know you're busy. I'd send you a quick email. I know you're busy. This might speed up the sales call that we've got later on. Here's just a few things we've talked about. Here's a quick visual overview of things so we don't have to do it live, which will save you time on the call. Jump into there and check it out if you like. And that might be call 1. Call number 5 might be then quotes, pricing, different things. We don't have the pricing on our website because it changes depending on how many seats people buy into our training product and stuff like that. So maybe you give them a bespoke quote or bespoke pricing, and you can invite other people in. So this is where it starts to become useful when you use it as a tool to enable, I hate the cliches kind of thing, but you use it as a tool to enable the buyer down their own buying journey, because other people can view the digital sales room as well. So rather than you going, Jared needs to also sign off on this, can you also send him a copy? Well, now you've got 2 copies of a bespoke document going off in different directions. Or what happens if I want to amend it? Well, I've got to say, well, here's the new copy in another 2 email chains, or you've got multiple people CC'd in, and it becomes very messy very quickly. So I think that's where the value of this comes from, because you've got the one source of truth where your buyer can go to, perhaps before they call you. Maybe there's a Q&A document in there that you built for them, or a video Q&A or something. It just allows you to give all these higher touch elements to the sales process and enable the buyer through the buyer's journey without having to pester them and be like, let's jump on another call. Let's do this. Let's do this. You can say, hey, I've dropped this in here. I hope you find it valuable. And then obviously you then use these tools on the back end to see if anyone actually cares, if anyone clicks on it or not. Because if you keep creating all this content, nobody cares about it. You're creating the wrong content for the wrong person at the wrong time. But if you can start to then understand what people want, you can then enable them, push them along the buyer's journey, and accelerate the kind of time to deal. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I agree with you. The concept you highlighted for your journey for people who buy the product on your website is, again, if I throw stuff into a folder, let me just kind of see if I can articulate this correctly. If I throw stuff in a folder, you're putting the onus back on me to go in there and search for it, right? And I think that's adding some friction. But the way you were saying is that the way you approach it on the buyer's journey is you almost walk them through. By the way, before the meeting, I just sent you this. Okay, by the way, at post-meeting, hey, by the way, here are the top things we discussed. So I think this might be of interest to you. So it's more personalized and customized as you nudge them through the journey. It seems like throwing stuff into a folder, and I may be missing some of the subtleties or the benefits of the product, but if it's throwing stuff in there so they can go get it when they want it, kind of a self-serve type of mentality, I don't know if that really works well. I don't know if that would work.
Sure.
I don't think so.
Think of it less as a folder, and different tools have different ways of going about this. But if I was to design one, Think it rather than a folder, have like that just everything gets dumped into. It's all random. Think of it. You can have like almost like a web page. You can have a title of last meeting's notes, and then you have them in there. Then you can have pre-call follow-up, and you can have that in there. And then you can have additional resources to share with leadership team. Say like you're selling to it via a champion in a large enterprise account. You can you can have those in there.
There's something in what you're saying. Well, I like it. There's something in what you're saying that's really like you're applying your design thinking hat to how it should be done. And I think that would be the way to go. I would buy it if it was something like that in terms of the concept being viable. If it was designed the way you're talking about, like step by step, walk them through and have these like decision trees. This is for them. Go here, do this. And I think that kind of guides them a little more.
Yep. And this is why, and we've talked about it on the show before, I'm convinced that a lot of these software companies were just like insane revenue numbers, right? Because they're doing these subscription-based models that, people buying into. There's seemingly tons of cash to be thrown at these SaaS companies at the moment. I'm still convinced, it's happened a little bit, we've seen it a little bit. I'm still convinced they're going to start buying, like your training organization, Victor, my training organization, because what just happened then was I, as a salesperson, communicated, hopefully somewhat effectively, how the tool can be used to you when you weren't sold on it prior, and now you're somewhat sold on it. You're at least open to the idea that it could work for your sales team. But maybe some of these tech companies...
Your framing was, maybe you should go sell for them, but your framing was crisper and to the point. Yeah. You gave the analogy of throwing stuff into the folder. Boom, got it, locked it in. And then you said, okay, but this is how we should do it. Design thinking approach, da-da-da-da-da. Yeah, great. So if he's listening, George.
But I think a lot of these companies just they're all just marketers, right? Maybe they've got salespeople. I think there's a training element to this, and the products don't work without training. And it goes back to what we were talking about earlier on. If there's no adoption because people don't understand it, then these subscription-based companies will fail in the medium term because people are just not going to renew. There's going to be a point. We're due some, there's been some economic turmoil over the past couple of years, right? Where I don't know if you agree, but my humble knuckle dragging opinions is there's going to be some turmoil in the next 2, 3, 5 years. There's going to be some kind of major crash when all of these nice to have software tools just get disintegrated, and there'll be a few that'll survive because a lot of them are nice to haves as opposed to a phone and an email address, which is what salespeople and contact databases is what salespeople really need to get deals done.
Yeah. And back to your point originally about, using all these different tools and where that time is being wasted for not hitting quota factors into all this. So cool. Shall we move to Culture Corner, Will?
Let's do it. There we go.
All right. There's a wonderful graphic. Love that graphic, by the way. By the way, I'm a fan of Ram Charan. Have you ever read any of his books?
No.
Ram Charan? To me, he's a great business intellectual. Kind of reminds me of a Michael Porter, people in that vein. But anyway, he wrote an article here called "Leading Through Inflation," and this really applies. Ram Charan's 4 Sales Essentials. So anyway, he was talking about inflation and pricing. And let me go through the 4 big bullet points he had. 1, pricing must not be controlled by the sales force. He quotes, "They have a psychological aversion to raising prices." Talk about stating the obvious. The result of frequent customer pushback and demands for discounts. And so he says, 1, we can't let the sales force control pricing. I think that's always a good thing, unless you have, a good reason. Did you ever do that, Will? Had to defend your pricing when you knew it was a good deal and there was some more long-term thinking? In other words, okay, our margins are not going to be good on this first deal, but here's what I see for the next, year or two. And when salespeople would approach me like that, it was always a better argument that I could take back to my management and fight for. Have you ever had to do that?
Do you know what the one thing surgeons, theatre managers, and CFOs of hospitals in the UK would complain about purchasing, right? Imagine, so I used to sell camera systems. So I've not got the endoscope with me, otherwise it would be on the table. I think it's I'm in the midst of having a massive clear out, so it might have even been binned at this point.
Let the endoscope go, man. Let it go.
I'm going to get another one though, just to annoy you. I just want to see you get angry and start hurling some F-bombs at me over Zoom.
Go ahead.
So camera basically looks inside the patient, goes off to what they call the camera stack, a big trolley on wheels with a camera control unit, a light source, a processor, and then obviously to make use of this, you need a screen to be able to see what's inside the patient. Otherwise, the whole thing is pointless, right? No one would complain about 20 grand for a camera control unit. No one would complain about 15 grand for a light source. No one would complain about a literally like 5 grand printer. And it was just a printer, right? And there was some medical device elements to it of it had to be, serviceable in that environment and that kind of thing. Everyone would complain about a 3 grand 27-inch monitor. Everybody. Everyone would go absolutely nuts over this monitor. I had surgeons threaten to come in and just take their telly from home and just stick it on there and save the NHS here in the UK some money. And all kinds of threats and people would complain about it. And the weird thing, not the weird thing, but the bad thing was we didn't manufacture them in either company that I worked for, the last 2 companies. They were all bought from this one medical device monitor company, and there was basically no margin on them whatsoever because it's a very specialist device. Me trying to pitch it and sell the value to it, I struggled every time as well. It got to the point where I just would stop including the price and just leaving it off the list and just adding the price onto the overall deal so people wouldn't pick up on it. That's how ridiculous it was. But the technology in the screen, just for anyone who is somewhat interested, if you imagine you're in theatre, you watch, or in the operating room, at home you watch telly and you're straight on toward the telly, aren't you? Well, in theatre, you might be kind of a 90-degree angle, 45-degree angle, up, down. There's super harsh lights everywhere, so it's got to be anti-glare. All these kind of things. The colours have got to be super accurate because what if the surgeon's cutting things open inside a patient via kind of endoscopes and via laparoscopic surgery. You can't have the color being off because they might literally chop open the wrong thing or see the blood is kind of a super dark. And I'm listening off all the things just verbatim here, all the stuff that everyone would kind of ask about. Blood is super dark, but reflection on organs is super light, so there's got to be super high contrast ratio. I could never sell it, Victor. That was the one thing. You have to buy it.
That's really interesting.
You cannot
because right now you sold me on it.
Sure.
You sold me on it. I mean, so you couldn't sell it.
Nope. So you have to buy it. You cannot use a non-medical device monitor in an operating room. There's tons of reasons why, tons and tons of reasons why. So you have to use that particular product. And then the next thing will be like, well, why isn't it HDMI? Well, no broadcast or industry, kind of higher industry monitors use HDMI. Everyone uses SDI. All the equipment here in the studio is all SDI. It's a tiny thin cable instead. And so the people will be fighting me over that because the SDI cable was 20 quid. They just spent 52 grand on a camera system and they're complaining about this one cable. But that was, I think I'm pretty good at sales, Victor. I was pretty good then. I'm even better now. But that was the one thing that people battled me on every single time on price when we made no margin on it. So the price couldn't go down. I think it was like 50, 70 quid that we made because it just had to be part of the unit. So yeah. So I don't know what your original question was because we went on a bit of a rant there.
Yeah, you totally went off on a tangent on that one. That's okay. But anyway, so the first thing you said, during the inflation period, pricing must not be controlled by the sales force. In this case, people like you will. Number 2, in an inflationary period, delaying price increase can be a disaster. So this is basically talking about, how do we deal with price in an environment where we have to raise prices? The first one is don't let the sales force control it. Number 2 is don't delay price increases because it can be a disaster. He quotes, the company needs a pricing philosophy and methodology that shows with precision when, where, and how, and by how much to raise prices. And I thought that was interesting. Let me just go through the next 2. You got to start with the executive vice president, number 3, for sales and marketing. You got to make sure they're on board with your vision of what we're trying to accomplish with pricing. Last but not least, which is pretty obvious, the CFO and the CEO can't expect these departments to change their own. Here's where we come in, Will. They have to create training sessions to help get the marketing and salespeople prepared to operate in this new environment. New environment being you're going to have to increase pricing.
Yep.
And it's, by the way, this is a very timely article because it really talks about the environment we're in now. And so I love the fact about the topic about make sure that sales or marketing is aligned with the philosophy of the company, but you still have to train salespeople to have those price conversations.
Have you raised your prices, Victor, in the past 18 months?
I have not. I tried moving the prices up last year, saw no change. I almost saw a decrease actually. And I think it's because by the way, I'm speaking specifically about the speaking business. Mm-hmm. On the platform, we've actually raised the price. So yes, on the sales velocity, we've raised the price. But on speaking, I've really pretty much held steady from 2 years ago. And I think it's because there's not that many deals out there. And so even people who are getting twice as much as me, I know are not getting that.
Sure.
And so I think people are rebalancing their budgets.
Sure. Well, that's a specific case, though, if people aren't doing in-person events as often as what they were. But we've raised our prices, more than 20%, and there's been a few value changes in what we offer to kind of offset some of this as well. I've had no one complain about price. Our prices need to go up again over at Sell Made Simple Academy. To be very frank and honest with you and the thousands of people who are listening to this and consuming this content, we need to raise prices again. I had a painter decorator in doing a couple of rooms in the house, in the actual house as opposed to the office. And I was chatting with him. I was just like, why are your prices the same as last time you came and did work for us? He was like, I don't know. I didn't think I could increase them. I was like, inflation over the past 2 or 3 years.
Just change your mindset.
You're losing money. You're literally losing money if you don't increase them. He was like, oh, yeah, I guess so. I was like,
that's why it was easier to increase for the sales velocity. I mean, we just, I think, doubled the price on that one. You know what I mean? And it's still rather reasonable. But on the speaking side, again, face-to-face speaking kept it the same. But I should highlight that for the virtual keynotes, where I didn't sell any of them pre-pandemic, really didn't sell any virtual keynotes pre-pandemic. Today, we're selling them at $5,000 a pop. And so that's another Betty. So for some reason, there's more tolerance there than the actual in-house or in-person. And I think it's because the overall expense of doing live events is just too much. So people are just trying to really their budgets.
Sure. Which makes total sense, right? If you can get that's a market force as opposed to reacting to inflation, I think. So I think that's slightly different to what perhaps this article is outlining. Because if inflation has been 5% last year in the US, 7% this year, you're down, 12, 13, 14, 15%, no matter where you are in the world. You've got to be increasing the prices because otherwise your profitability just took a massive tank. And where's that going to come from? If the economy is kind of a little bit wibbly still at the moment, it's absolutely insane. And I think do we not communicate with salespeople, Victor? And this will be my last point of the show, right? Do we treat, because we've touched on this a bunch of times so far, do we treat salespeople like they are idiots? And I'm a knuckle dragging. I always say this. I'm a knuckle dragging salesperson myself. I've got 2 sales calls later on this evening. I've got to get a rocket up the arse of an estate agent in the next 15 minutes to get rocking and rolling, right? So I've got to sell her on allowing me to spend a load of money on some property, which is stupid. But I'm still a salesperson. I'm still doing it. But from a sales leadership perspective, do they just think salespeople are thick? Do they not? They not think that they can understand this idea of inflation, market forces, and so they have to put incentive schemes into place to get them to raise prices. Do sales leadership not have intelligent conversations with salespeople and just see them as a bunch of knuckle-dragging idiots who are just there to hit a quota, then go home?
They do not see them as knuckle-dragging idiots. I don't think that's the case. I think they discount the psychological benefit of explaining what's going on with the business. For example, if I tell my salespeople, I said, look, here's what's happening on the material side. Here's what's happening in operations, manufacturing. Our prices are naturally rising. We're doing everything to push down. So we've been able to, kind of hold the line at a certain percentage point, but nonetheless, we're going to have to raise prices here or we just can't be profitable and we won't be able to do A, B, C, D. Therefore, what I need you, sales team, to do is to understand that this is the position we're in. They'll go, okay, got it. Now do you understand why we need at least a 5 or 7, 10%, 12% increase on our pricing? Yes, good. Hold the line. And I think that's a short version, but it helps fortify the salespeople when they're having those tough price conversations. And then I would layer on top of that some training on how to have, pricing conversations.
Sure. Is that something you cover in Master the Upsell, upselling on price?
The upselling, yes. Thank you for bringing that up, because in mastering the upsell, it's really about how do you position a proposal and then kind of move them in a certain direction. Well, they buy the more expensive one, and hopefully you'll have your higher margins and your upper options. And so that's one way of doing it, right? But then there's so mastering the upsell really talks about positioning and persuasion and using pricing influence to move the price point up, right? Or sell more. But I think there has to be another discussion on how do we have these blunt conversations with with our customers. And I think that's going to be critical over the next year or two. And if what you say is correct, if your prediction is correct, that over the next 2-3 years, we're going to see some type of we'll call it a little meltdown here. A lot of these companies are going to have to get better at protecting price and having those price conversations. So get ready. I would train my salespeople, but I don't think managers treat them like idiots. I think they just discount the advantage of actually having a conversation about the business so salespeople get it.
I think a lot of sales leadership treat salespeople like salespeople, not business people. And I think the sales role is going to become more and more of a business role moving forward, where maybe you're not setting your own pricing, but you have to, if you're selling to a CFO, you've got to then be in a position to communicate, not on the level of a CFO, and they're not expecting that, but not quite far off. You know what I mean? You've got to be able to explain that your profit and loss is going to interact with this, and then your margins mean that, and the fact that everything's shipping and everything's delayed and there's a lack of chips, all this kind of stuff that on the surface seems like some kind of pop science or pop business article. People will want answers. And if you can communicate those answers because you are a business person, you've got business acumen within your tiny little niche and tiny account. I'm not saying you need to be the equivalent of like a startup founder or an executive CEO or anything like that. Don't want you to, because it's too broad. You're not gonna be able to use any of it. You need to be knowledgeable in your little space, in your niche, in your industry. You need to know your buyer's journey. You need to know what the value they get from it. You need to know your value proposition. You need to know how to communicate effectively market changes for your customers as well. So the change in what they're going through over the past few years and how that interacts with what you're doing. Because if your customers have changed and you can document and share that back to them, that their market's changed, what they're doing has changed, and your product has changed on the back of it, there's your easy upsell on price. Hey, you were doing this, now you're doing this. You're having great success with our product. Get on the next tier. The price is now this, and however we need to kind of angle on things.
I love what you said initially when you said we need to treat salespeople like business people. I couldn't agree with you more. In fact, I'm going to give you an applause.
Oh dear, we've got Victor on a soundboard. This is going to now become like the most cheesy show. It's going to turn into some like 80s morning radio show. Jeez.
Oh, I couldn't resist that one. But I do agree with you. Well, I think you're spot on with that one, though, that we have to treat salespeople like business people. Move beyond just talking about sales and, teach them a little bit about the business and what's going on, and maybe they'll have a better understanding of what we're trying to accomplish from a leadership standpoint.
For sure. Okay, anything else to wrap up with, Victor, other than give you a book a plug, mate?
Mastering the Upsell. If you haven't gotten it, why not? I think it's a great book, man. Like I said, it's very tactical. So, and again, this is the data point I always want to emphasize with this book. You can increase your sales by up to 30% by just simply focusing on selling on your existing customer base and upselling them and cross-selling them. That's enough reason to buy the book and really begin to implement some of these strategies.
For sure. And tell me if I'm wrong, Victor, in my experience, upselling people is a far more, if you've served them well, the product's worked and you've got good onboarding, you've not done what we debated earlier on, having a crappy product where no one cares about. If people care about what you do, you've helped them, those are way nicer conversations to have than cold calling some schmuck who doesn't care about you, has no idea what you do, and doesn't want to spend any time with you. I find my upselling conversations, both in medical device sales and now in the training that we do over at salesman.org, I find those conversations are way more healthy, interesting, and enjoyable. So that's the kind of sales that I want to be involved with as well.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, I feel like screaming from the mountaintop, you idiots. Upsell, cross-sell. This is where the money's at right now. This is how you increase your sales velocity. Because you know the people already, your sales cycles just shrink, which means you're going to sell more and more often. So it's amazing to me that more people aren't talking about upselling and how important it is, especially in today's environment. If you have a captured customer, sell them more, increase your wallet share.
There we go. So you get Mastering the Upsell on Amazon and everywhere else. And my name is Will Barron, founder of salesman.org. That is Victor Antonio, sales royalty. And we'll speak with you again on next week's This Week in Sales.